All right, this is video number 2 of Iron and Oak, and here we're going to look at the ship cards. Looking at the card for the CSS Atlanta, the first thing that strikes your attention is the name of the ship and the number of points it is worth. The points are really for the campaign game. The scenarios will give victory conditions for each side to be able to win or to acquire a draw result, but the point value is mostly for the campaign, and I'm afraid I haven't done anything with the campaign game, so I can't give you a whole lot of information about that. Other than that, a detailed campaign is included in the game. On the ship itself, there is, let's look at the text here at the top left-hand column. Under the word CSS Atlanta, you see MN and then the 0-2:10. What that means is that's its ability to maneuver in the game. To maneuver in the game is to move your ship counter from one box to another box, or to move within a box in order to cross the T on an enemy vessel and maybe be able to shoot at the bow or the stern or make a ram or spar torpedo attack on that particular ship. Now, the MN notation means it's an abbreviation for maneuver. The 0-2 means that when this particular ship has acquired 0 to 2 hits on it, then it's going to roll a D10 in order to find out how it maneuvers. So the abbreviation MN means maneuver. 0-2 means if it's taken 0 to 2 hits. The 10 means it rolls a D10 to determine whether or not it's going to maneuver. This game, like Kaiser's Pirates, revolves heavily around a concept known as challenge die rolls. To do a number of different things in the game, you're going to have to do a challenge die roll. And when instructed to do a challenge die roll, you're going to roll one or more dice. It could be a D4, a D8, a D6, or a D10. And they're all color-coded in the game. D4 is being red, D6 is being white, D8 being green, and the D10 being blue. So when it says maneuver 10, what you're going to do is you're going to throw a D10 die, and then the opponent, based on how far you are trying to move your vessel, will be able to roll challenge dice in response. So let's just say for a moment the Atlanta has no damage, so it's going to roll a D10, and we rolled a 4. Now let's say that the maneuver table says that the defender gets to roll a D8 and a D6. All right, they roll a D8, a D6, and they pick their highest die roll. You never add dice together. You always just pick the highest die roll. So in this case, the highest die roll for the defender was higher than, as long as it's higher than or equal to the challenge die roll, the challenge fails. So in order for a challenge to succeed, you have to have higher die roll than your opponent. So that's what the maneuver notations are for. So the CSS Atlanta, if it takes 3 to 6 hits, in order to maneuver, it's going to throw a D8, a D6, and a D4. But once it gets 7 to 9 hits on it, its ability maneuver is going to drop down to a D8 and a D6. So that's the maneuver notations. Obviously, once it takes 10 hits, if you look at the top right column on the CS Atlanta's card, it says total hits 10. That's the maximum number of hits it can take. Once it takes that, the vessel sinks. And I'm hoping that they'll be able to graphically represent this a little bit better than on the playtest graphics. So it may seem a little bit confusing at first, but once you start playing it, it's really not confusing at all. The crew notation, the number 5, you see a number 5/8-9. What that means is if this vessel has taken crew hits equal to 5 or more, it's taken light crew hits and certain penalties will apply. If it takes 8 to 9 crew hits, it has taken major penalties in their crew hits, and so that vessel will be forced to withdraw from the battle, and they must try to maneuver in such a way as to exit the rectangular grid. If the ship moves off a grid, it has exited the grid, and if I remember right, the other player gets certain victory points for forcing the withdrawal of an enemy vessel. The draft notation is very important. So right-hand column at the top of the card where it says draft, you see the number 2, 3/7+. Okay, here's what that means. Draft 2 means that it has a draft of 2. So it can be in a box that has a shoal depth of 2 or 3 with no danger at all. But if it goes into any shallower waters, in other words, if it goes into shoal that has a depth of 1 or 0, there is a chance that the vessel will ground. And a challenge die must be made in order to avoid grounding. So that's what the draft information is there. Now the 3/7+, here's what that represents. It means that if this vessel has taken at least 3 hits, if it's taken 3 or more hits, if it's taken 7 or more hits, the 7+, if it's taken 7 or more hits, then its draft is increased to 3, thus increasing its chances of grounding on the shoals. So does anyone have any questions so far about the card data? That's probably the most confusing part of the card data, is just those abbreviations at the top. Now there's also a little symbol, I can't really tell what it is, right beneath the flag ensign, but the symbol on the CSS Atlanta indicates, that particular symbol, whatever it's supposed to be, indicates that it's vulnerable to grape shot. The crew could take damage from grape shot. That's what that symbol represents. All right, now there's a whole bunch of other boxes beneath the CSS Atlanta cards top column. You see that there's a row of 4 different boxes, and let's cover the one that has the word SPAR underneath it. Whenever the CSS Atlanta makes a ram attack, it's going to roll a D10 and a D6. That's what's indicated by the notation 10, 6 in that top left-hand column box. The word SPAR underneath it indicates it is equipped with a SPAR torpedo, which enhances its ability to make a single ram attack. Now the box to the right has a notation S with a 6, 7, and then it's got several colored boxes which correspond to the types of dice that will be thrown: 10, 8, and 4. What those dice symbols represent is whenever this part of the ship takes a hit from a cannon shot, from a gunshot, the defensive armor die roll is going to be a D10, a D8, and a D4. And you pick the highest die roll of that mix. The S means it's the the stern portion of the ship. The box to the right is an M, which means midships. And the number, the 4, 5, that's the 2-hit, that's the hit location die roll. Whenever you shoot at an enemy vessel, you roll a D8 for hit location. So in this case, if I rolled a 1, that would correlate to the WL box, which is got a 1, 8, and a D10 and a D6 notation. That's the water line. So you have the stern of the ship, the midships, the bow, the water line, and then you have D. This is the box on the right bottom, and it's got just a D8 symbol in it and a whole bunch of numbers with asterisks on top. What that's for is if this ship is being fired upon by a fort battery, there is a chance that plunging fire will hit the deck. Ship-to-ship combat, that's not going to happen, but from a fort on a bluff, that is possible. And so that's the deck armor. You'll notice that the boxes, S, M, B, WL, they all have this background that looks like gray and white stripes. What that indicates is that this has iron plating. The D box for the deck has like a wood grain texture, and what that symbolizes is that is simply the only armor that is there is wood. There's no iron on that particular part. And that's going to dictate what sort of combat table you use when you use gunnery. So, everybody with me so far? Last piece of information on the cards is there's like a little overhead view of the ship. Looks like a really tall house. What that's got is there's 2 dice symbols in the middle of the CSS Atlanta, D10 and a D8. And what that signifies is that's its gunnery. That's the battery on this particular ship. So when this ship engages in gunnery, it's going to throw a D10 and a D8 and pick its highest die roll. The -2 on the top for the bow and the -2 on the stern indicate that if this ship is either stern on or bow on to an enemy vessel, there will be a negative modifier because most of its gun battery is along the side, not to the front and the rear, not to the bow or the stern of the ship. Facing is not dealt with in the game and is not important except under one circumstance, which I'll show later on, and that is when an enemy vessel is in the same box as another ship. For example, it is possible that one of these ships, let's say that the Atlanta crosses the T successfully on the Nahant. Here's what would happen. Let's say the Atlanta crosses the T. Let me do it right here. One of two things can happen. If it's successful in that maneuver within that box, it can choose to either be stern on to the enemy vessel. In other words, the enemy vessel's stern is facing the side of the Atlanta, in which case you'd position the counters like I've done so here. Or you could do bow on and fire at the bow of the enemy vessel in this way. When you're in that position, if the USS Nahant was in this particular position, then the modifier for firing only through its bow would then apply. For the Atlanta, if the situation was reversed and the Atlanta was, let me position this right here. Let's say that the Atlanta is stern on to the USS Nahant. Nahant is firing at the stern of the Atlanta. It's crossed the T. In this position here, then, if the Atlanta were to fire back, it would be firing through its stern. So it'd fire a D10 and a D8, but a -2 modifier would apply to both die rolls. So that's what the gunnery symbol is on these particular ships. And again, facing, not important except when another vessel has crossed the T on an enemy vessel. All right, so that's it for the ship cards themselves. Now, there is another type of card in the game that I'm going to cover really quickly, and that is the action cards. I'm going to flip one over here. I'm going to flip one of the action cards over here because that's pretty much all of the information on the ships themselves. Let's see. Oh yeah, Arnold asked a question. Let me cover this question here before I go further. In a situation like the crossing of the T, I hope there's a way to disengage. There is. You can maneuver a way to try to get out of that position and maybe return the favor. One of the things that's going to happen as you fire at enemy vessels, smoke's going to obscure your vessel, which does enhance your ability to disengage, get away. The USS Nahant, for example, has a shallower draft, so it can use the shoals to its advantage to try to disengage if it gets into an unfavorable situation like that. All right, so those are the ship cards in the game. There's another type of card I want to cover, and that's the action cards. I just worked up some sample artwork concept for the back of it. These cards would be held in a hand, would not be visible to the players, but for our purposes, I'm keeping them all face up. So the scenario will dictate how many cards each player draws prior to the game. So in this case, both players draw 6 cards, and then the Union player will get 2 more cards when the USS Weehawken enters the game. So here's the 6 cards for the Confederacy. They have slow maneuver, strike, screen, slow maneuver, rapid fire, rapid fire. So that's their 6 cards. When you draw your hand of cards in the game, those are the only action cards you will have for the entire game. You are not required to use these cards to do things in the game. These are like special actions, special abilities, and think of them as your the nuances of tactical choice in this particular battle. So in this particular battle, these are the only options available to the Confederacy. Now, at the end of a player's turn, they may voluntarily discard a card from their hand, like say I wanted to discard screen, which is entirely useless to the Confederacy in this battle because they're not protecting any other vessels. So he could discard this and put it face down, and then we could draw another card out. But here's the thing, you can only discard and replace a number of cards in a given battle equal to half of your hand size. So if your hand size at the beginning of the game was 6, you can only replace 3 cards during the course of that entire battle. When you play one of these cards, it is not replenished into your hand. Okay, so these are your options. You'll be able to replace up to 3 of those, and that's it. So those are the action cards. Let me put this one back into the deck.